see the world, if the United States is the bad guys and China is the good guys, what does that world look like? You'll be able to just exist with that thought, because that is what the Chinese leadership and many Chinese citizens, if not now, maybe in the future, will believe. And we have to kind of do the calculation, the simulation forward from that. The same with Russia, same with other nations.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And just, I always think of Michael McFaul at Stanford, who was the American ambassador to Russia, I think between 2012 and 2014. And he told me that he told Putin that Putin didn't have to worry about NATO expansion because the United States was a benign hegemon. And I asked Mike what Putin's response was to that. And Mike said that Putin didn't believe it. But Mike believed that he should believe it, and that we could move NATO eastward to include Ukraine, and in the end, we'd get away with it because we are a benign hegemon. But the fact is, that's not what Putin saw. Putin saw us as a malign hegemon. And what Mike thinks, or any American thinks, doesn't matter. What matters is what Putin thinks.
But also, the drums of war have been beating for some reason. NATO expansion has been threatened for some reason. So you've talked about NATO expansion being dead. So it doesn't make sense from a geopolitical perspective on the Europe side to expand NATO.
He's right.
But nevertheless, that threat has been echoed. So why has NATO expansion been pushed from your perspective?
There are two reasons. One is, first of all, we thought it was a wonderful thing to bring more and more countries into NATO. We thought that it facilitated peace and prosperity. It was ultimately all for the good. And we also thought that countries like Ukraine had a right to join NATO. These are sovereign countries that can decide for themselves, and the Russians have no say in what Ukraine wants to do. And then finally, and this is a point I emphasized before, we were very powerful, and we thought we could shove it down their throat. So it's a combination of those factors that led us to pursue what I think was ultimately a foolish policy.
We've talked about how wars get started. How do you hope the war in Ukraine ends? What are the ways to end this war? What are the ways to achieve peace there? To end the I would say, senseless death of young men, as always happens in war.
I'm sad to say I don't have a good answer to that. I don't think there's any real prospect of a meaningful peace agreement. I think it's almost impossible. I think the best you can hope for at this point is at some point the shooting stops, you have a ceasefire, and then you have a frozen conflict. And that frozen conflict will not be highly stable. And the Ukrainians in the West will do everything they can to weaken Russia's position. And the Russians will go to great lengths to not only damage that dysfunctional rump state that Ukraine becomes, but the Russians will go to great lengths to sow dissension within the alliance, and that includes in terms of transatlantic relations. So you'll have this continuing security competition between Russia on one side and Ukraine and the West on the other, even when you get a frozen peace, or you get a frozen conflict, and the potential for escalation there will be great. So I think this is a disaster.
That's a very realist perspective. Let me ask you sort of the human side of it. Do you think there's some power to leaders sitting down, having a conversation, man to man, leader to leader, about this? there is just a lot of death happening. It seems that from an economic perspective, from a historic perspective, from a human perspective, both nations are losing. Is it possible for Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin to sit down and talk and to figure out a way
It's
where
too late to go back,
security
Naruto.
concerns are addressed and both nations can minimize the amount of suffering that's happening and create a path towards future flourishing?
I think the answer is no.
Even with the United States involved. 3 people.
Well, I think if the United States is involved, the answer is definitely no. You have to get the Americans out. And then I think if you have Zelensky and Putin talking, you have a sliver of a chance there. The Americans are a real problem. Look, let's go back to what happens right after the war starts, okay? As I said before, we're talking March, early April of 2022. The war starts on February 24th, 2022. And as I said to you, the two sides were negotiating in Istanbul, and they were also negotiating through Naftali Bennett. And the Bennett track and the Turkish track were operating together. I mean, they were not at cross purposes at all. What happened? Bennett tells the story very clearly that they had made significant progress in reaching an agreement. This is Zelensky on one side and Putin on the other. Bennett is talking in person to both Putin and Zelensky. And what happens to produce failure? The answer is the United States and Britain get involved and tell Zelensky to walk. They tell Zelensky to walk. If they had come in and encouraged Zelensky to try to figure out a way to shut this one down and worked with Bennett and worked with Erdogan, we might have been able to shut the war down then. But it was the United States.
Well, let me sort of push back on that. You're correct, but sort of United States paints this picture that everybody's aligned. So maybe you can correct me, but I believe in the power of individuals, especially individual leaders. Again, whether it's Biden, Trump, or whoever, goes into a room and says, in a way that's convincing, that no more NATO expansion. And actually just on a basic human level, ask the question of why
fucking Naruto over here.
Senseless killing. And look at the interest of one, Russia. Look at the interest of the other, Ukraine. Their interests are pretty simple. And say, the United States is going to stay out of this. We're not going to expand NATO. And say all that in a way that's convincing, which is NATO expansion is silly at this point. China is the big threat. We're not going to do this kind of conflict escalation with Russia. The Cold War is over. Let's normalize relations.
Let me just embellish your argument. Okay.
Thank you. I need it.
If we say there's a sliver of a chance that you can do this, and I do think there is a sliver of a chance, let me just embellish your point.
All the help I can get.
2 things have to be done here, in my opinion. One is Ukraine has to become neutral. And it has to completely sever all security ties with the West. Right? It's not like you can say we're not going to expand NATO to include Ukraine, but we're going to continue to have some loose security arrangement with Ukraine. None of that. It has to be completely separate. Ukraine has to be on its own. Okay? And number 2, Ukraine has to accept the fact that the Russians are going to keep the 4 oblasts that they've now annexed in Crimea. Right? The Russians are not going to give them back. And what you really want to do if you're Zelensky or who's ever running Ukraine in this scenario that we're positing is you want to make sure the Russians don't take another 4 oblasts to include Kharkiv and Odessa, right? if I'm playing Putin's hand and this war goes on, I'm thinking about taking 4 more oblasts. I want to take about 43% of Ukraine and annex it to Russia, right? And I certainly want Odessa, and I certainly want Kharkiv, and I want the 2 oblasts in between as well.
Literally, or as leverage in negotiation
No,
or Ukraine neutrality?
I want them literally. I want to conquer them literally. But my point to you is, if we can begin to talk about cutting a deal now, you may be able to head that kind of aggression off at the pass. In other words, you may be able to limit Putin and Russia to annexing the 4 oblasts that they've now annexed, plus Crimea. That's the best I think you can hope for. But the point is, you have to get the Ukrainians to accept that. You have to get the Ukrainians to accept becoming a truly neutral state and conceding that the Russians keep a big chunk of territory. It's about 23% of Ukrainian territory that they've annexed. And I find it hard to imagine any Ukrainian leader agreeing to that.
Well, there could be more nuanced things, like no military involvement between the United States and Ukraine, but economic involvement, sort of financial support, sort of normalizing
Money?
economic relationships.
Let's give them money.
Russia.
I think you could probably get away with that. I think that the tricky question there that you would have to answer is, what about EU expansion, right? And I think EU expansion is probably a no-no for the Russians, because most people don't recognize this, but there is a military dimension built into EU expansion. It's not purely an economic alliance or relationship or institution, whatever word you want to use. There's a military dimension to that. And in the run-up to the war, actually in the run-up to the 2014 crisis when it first broke out, the Russians made it clear they saw EU expansion as a stalking horse for NATO expansion. So EU expansion is tricky. But I think your point of close economic relations between healthy economic relations, to use a better term, between Ukraine and the West is possible. I think the Russians have a vested interest in, if it's a neutral Ukraine, they have a vested interest in that Ukraine flourishing. But that then brings us back to the territorial issue. Right?
Well, so do you believe it's possible for individual human relations to counteract the structural forces that you talked about? So meaning the leaders being able to pick up the phone and make agreements that are good for humanity as a whole and for their individual nations.
I think leadership matters here. I mean, one of the real problems here is that there's no trust, and on the Russian side, and that has to do with the Minsk agreements. The Minsk agreements, which were designed to shut down the civil war in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass, really mattered to the Russians. And there were 4 players involved in the Minsk process, 4 main players: Russia and Ukraine, of course, and then Germany and France. And I believe the Russians took the Minsk Accords seriously. I believe Putin took them very seriously. He wanted to shut down that conflict. Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande, who was the French leader, and Poroshenko, who was the Ukrainian leader. Those were the 3 key players besides Putin. Again, Hollande from France, Merkel from Germany, and Poroshenko from Ukraine have all explicitly said they were not seriously interested in reaching an agreement in all of the discussions with Putin. They were bamboozling him. They were trying to trick him so that they would buy time to build up Ukraine's military. Putin is profoundly upset about these admissions by these 3 leaders. He believes he was fooled into thinking that Minsk could work. He believes that he negotiated in good faith and they did not. And he believes that the level of trust now between Russia and the West is virtually zero as a result of this experience over Minsk. I only bring this up because it cuts against your argument that leaders could pick up the phone and talk to each other and trust each other, at least somewhat, to work out a meaningful deal. If you're Putin, at this point in time, trusting the West is not an idea that's going to be very attractive at all. In fact, you're going to distrust anything they say.
Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you're sitting across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leader...
Okay, Naruto.
Like, override the general structural distrust of the West. And say, you know what, I like this guy. Or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk. Have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, the other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
When you're the leader of a country in an anarchic system, you have to be very careful not to let
John?
trust in...
John is schooling Lex right now. I feel a little sorry for Naruto pre-Shippuden over here. Lex, you looking like Naruto pre-Shippuden. I'm just saying, man, you getting schooled by the old man shit. He's trying to explain this to you the best way he can.
And he believes that the level of trust now between Russia and the West is virtually zero as a result of this experience over Minsk. I only bring this up because it cuts against your argument that leaders could pick up the phone and talk to each other and trust each other, at least somewhat, to work out a meaningful deal. If you're Putin, at this point in time, trusting the West is not an idea that's going to be very attractive at all. In fact, you're going to distrust anything they say.
Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you're sitting across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like, override the general structural distrust of the West. And say, you know what, I like this guy. Or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk. Have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, the other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
Yeah, the other thing about human nature is that Putin might forgive us. Bro, for real?
Deal.
For real? Not for
beautiful
real
thing
though.
about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
When I think of Putin, Vladimir Putin, I think forgiveness and trying again. The number one qualities of the leader.
Well,
legs.
The other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
When you're the leader of a country in an anarchic system, you have to be very careful not to let your trust in a foreign leader take you too far.
If I was clipping this would be the clip. If I wanted the money shot of this interview so far is this 20 seconds right here.
Scotched a potential deal.
How do I clip this? Can I clip this?
Well, in fact, you're going to distrust anything they say.
I want to clip from here. So I clip.
Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting them. The general, yeah, distrust anything the West say, the West, and say, you know, yeah, I like whatever. We can sit down together. Yeah, distrust multiple talks. Yeah.
Just and the Americans came and they scotched a potential.
What? Yeah, distrust anything the West said. Well, yeah, distrust. Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like override the general structural distrust of the West and say, you know what, I like this guy or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk, have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual forgiveness and there's
leader of anarchic system.
Yeah, distrust
leader of when you're the
trying again. Yeah, trying. Yeah. Trying again. Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like override the general structural distrust of the West and say, you know what, I like this guy or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk, have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, the other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
When you're
distrust anything the West say, but there isn't again.
When you're
distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like override the general structural distrust of the West and say, you know what, I like this guy or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk, have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March. The Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
The other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again. Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like override the general structure distrust of the West and say, you know what, I like this guy or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk, have multiple talks.
Just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, the other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again.
When you're the leader,
the way human nature works. Yeah, distrust anything the West say, but there is individual humans. The way human nature works is when you sit across from a person, you can trust a human being while still distrusting the West. I mean, I believe in the power of that. I think with the right leaders, you can sit down and talk. Like override the general structural distrust of the West and say, you know what, I like this guy or gal, whatever. I do hope Zelensky and Putin sit down together and talk. Have multiple talks.
just remember they were doing that in March, and the Americans came in and the British came in, and they scotched a potential deal.
Well, the other beautiful thing about human nature, there's forgiveness and there's trying again. Yeah, distrust ain't.
That was a great first tweet, Jesse. Good job. Am I streaming? Yes. That was my first tweet, guys. What do you think? Pretty good? Ooh, we're supposed to be watching Aswan Gold, not John Mearsheimer. I'm sorry.
Of a country in an anarchic system, you have to be very careful not to let your trust in a foreign leader take you too far, because if that foreign leader betrays you or betrays your trust and stabs you in the back, you could die. And again, you want to remember that the principal responsibility of any leader, I don't care what country it is,
America
is to ensure
first.
the survival of their state. And that means that, you know, trust is only going to buy you so much. And when you've already betrayed the trust of a leader, you really are not going to be able to rely on trust very much.
I'm playing Demon Hunter. Can anybody in the room say Illidan Stormrage? Anybody in the room say Illidan Stormrage? Here, let you hear it one more time.
You want to remember that the principal responsibility of any leader, I don't care what country it is to ensure the survival of their state. And that means that, you know, trust is only going to buy you so much. And when you've already betrayed the trust of a leader, you really are not going to be able to rely on trust very much to help you moving forward.
Just saying.
Now, you disagree with that? I hope you're right. And if they can shut down the Ukraine-Russia war,
then we can stop having World War. And that would be a great thing. You got that one stone to rule them all look on you. Or hiding. Holy shit. Oh. Oh shit. Too bad we didn't jump in front of that beam just in time to get strong. Well, that's cool. Sounds like Garrosh. You pro Hellscream or anti Hellscream? Put it in the chat below. I supported Garrosh as the war chief, or I disapproved of the great leader at the time. Kill him. Alright, we have to. Traitor. He'll be my rear guard, that means he'll do nothing. Alright, Primalist. My death will be agony. I think your death is gonna be agony, kid. Yeah. You're weak. You're weak. Magma Talon. Not their original name. Magma Talon. I mean, I guess by this point you're kind of calling it in. Magma Talon. Maybe it's not too bad. My Death Knight's name is Fatal Horn. So, you know, Magma Talon. Okay. Alright. Thanks, man. It's nice to be here. Return to Valdrakken and report. Oh, that's kind of high in the sky. Well, that is beautiful. I love what you got going on, man. Something to keep that art pushed together. Oh, that is a nice looking. I don't want to go all the way back up there. That's so far away. Look at this fight path. You're getting schooled, Lex.
If I'm proved dead
You're getting
wrong,
schooled.
that would be wonderful news. My prediction that this war is going to go on for a long time and end in an ugly way is a prediction that I don't like at all. So I hope I'm wrong.
You wrote that many in the West believe that the best hope for ending the Ukraine war is to remove Vladimir Putin from power, but you argue that this isn't the case. Can you explain?
Well, a lot of people thought when they were having all that trouble, the Russians were having all that trouble with Prigozhin and the Wagner group, that Putin was vulnerable.
Whoa. Look at this. This looks like a bunch of fucking... church-going, gun club, running, mask-wearing battalion of Nazis. They don't all have the same weapon. They're using different guns. They don't even all have helmets. Some of them have bats. How many people do you think that he had under his control?
And was likely to be overthrown. And what would happen is a peace-loving leader would replace Putin. I made 2 points at the time. I would make those same 2 points now. Number one, he's not likely to be overthrown. He was not likely then to be overthrown. And I think, you know, as long as his health holds up, I think he will remain in power. My second point is, if he doesn't remain in power and he's replaced, I would bet a lot of money that his replacement will be more hawkish and more hardline than Putin is. I actually think one could argue that Putin was too trusting of the West before the war started. And number two, I think one could argue that he has not waged the war against Ukraine as vigorously as one might have expected. He was slow to mobilize the nation for war, and he has pursued a limited
I made
war
it to the
in all sorts of ways.
in-game.
The Israelis,
This is
for
the main
example,
city.
have killed more civilians in
Bell
Gaza
Jackin.
in 1 month
So we're
than the
lagging.
Russians have killed over 18 months in Ukraine. The idea that Vladimir Putin is waging a punishment campaign and killing on purpose large numbers of
I might
civilians
kill
is
my
simply
YouTube
not true.
feed.
All this is to say that I would imagine that if Putin leaves office and someone else comes in to replace him, that someone else will be at least, if not more hardline than him in terms of waging the war, and certainly will not trust the West any more than he has.
By way of advice, let me ask you, if I were to have a conversation, interview Vladimir Putin and Zelensky individually, what should I ask them? If you, me, and Vladimir Putin, I had
Oh, Captain. So when I could talk to Alex Chaucer personally, but it's fine. Where's Dormo? The thread of time flows like a river, with many bends and branches. Originally, those flows can be changed. However, any anomaly left unresolved may doom our destiny to a false timeline. We are quickly approaching one of those anomalies. I have seen Chromie to the sent her to the shifting sands to investigate the correct any issues to the one true timeline. I foresee that your assistance is invaluable. Please lend us your aid and meet me with Chronormal. The one true timeline, huh? We're serving a guy who talks about the one true timeline. I don't know about that. Fuck. You guys hunt demons like me. Everybody's cool now. Look at all their dragons. I used to run an add-on called Census, and it would take a poll of how many people are online at the time. I could see how many were Tauren, how many were Paladins. I used to log on just to run that add-on. It's actually kind of weird. It's actually really weird. It's a really weird coincidence. Oh, shit. Well, I can set my destination, huh? Pokemon has better coders than you guys. I guess I'm headed that way. I think that's going to be southeast. And I need to fly like this. Okay, I can't believe I didn't grab this. Well, anyway. I'll never make it to where I need to go. Oh. Oh. This is going to be a bad situation. How am I supposed to get over here? Okay. Hey, Meowie. You here to give me a hint? I can't see now. Meowie. 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 Hey, pretty girl, pretty girl. People thought it was hard to get around during fucking Shadowlands, bro. This event, I'm just supposed to pick these up. Why am I not even going forward anymore? Two is the trick, man. Fly upwards, but I get no speed. Yeah, you give me the heebie-jeebies. You go sleep. You go sleep, baby girl. Yes, heebie-jeebies. Mind your own business. No, that's my. I know what you're doing. You're coming up here to play with my pins. Go here. You see this? Go get it. You see this? Go get it. See this? Go get it. Huh. She don't listen. Not listening. Roll me. There's no missing me to hell. This voice acting is shit, call me. Sorry. I hope you got paid a lot of money. My first assignment, unstable temporal energy seeping into the forest, affecting the wildlife. Need to access the impact to collect magic of the Time Walkers. Zara shakes her head a moment. I was examining a pack of Volquin when I was attacked by a crazed bear overflowing with time magic. Caught me off guard. I barely escaped. Could you find my mission gear for me, Demon Hunter? You might also have to deal with the bear. We'll see. Boom, bitch. You suck. Skin you boys up. I hope so. We might hit 70 tonight. That might be a good goal. Interesting. I'm collecting time energy. Time energy. Oops. I gotta turn on auto. I don't know what I'm thinking. Piece of shit.